Hi everyone and welcome to Creative Cakes by Sharon. Are you finding it hard to choose between Elsa or Anna? Well, today I've got the perfect solution for you. I'm going to show you how to create this beautiful cake showcasing both the sisters, Elsa and Anna. After creating my tutorials on Elsa, Anna, Olaf and Elsa's castle, I've had lots of requests to do something different, so I hope you're going to enjoy this tutorial of the sisters together. So let's get started. Today, of course, I've got my Anna and Elsa dolls. I've also got two 8-inch round cakes, and these are quite tall 8-inch rounds. They're about 2.5 inches tall each. If you've got shorter cakes, you probably need 3 8-inch rounds for this. I've got my fondant roller, I've got a large serrated knife, I've got my offset spatula, a pizza cutter, an X-Acto blade. I've also got my palette knife. I've got some water and a paintbrush. I've got some light blue sanding sugar. I've got some blue glittery flakes, and the fondant I'm using for Elsa I've got light blue and dark blue, and then for Anna I've got some dark blue, pink, some black and some green. I've got a little flower plunge cutter as well as some other little cutters. These are little petal cutters, but you can use any shape you like. I'm just going to use them for decoration on Anna's skirt, so anything you've got lying around. I've got a 1-inch round cutter and a larger round cutter. These are cookie cutters, and you basically need a round that's large enough to go around both of the dolls' bodies. I've got some snowflakes which I've prepared out of some fondant and let dry a little bit. I've also got some light blue buttercream frosting, as well as my round board which I've covered in some fondant. So the first thing I'm going to do is pop a little bit of the buttercream frosting onto my cake setup board and pop one of the 8-inch cakes onto the board. Using my large serrated knife, I'm just going to cut the dome section off this cake. Then using my round cutter, I'm going to cut out a circle from the center of the cake and remove it. Using the buttercream frosting, I'm going to apply a nice generous amount to this bottom layer of cake. And again, using my large round cutter, I'm going to cut the center of the other cake out. Because the cake's so tall, it's not going to go all the way through, so I'm going to use my knife to cut the bottom half of the circle out and pop it onto the bottom layer. Now, to keep the dolls from getting cake and frosting all over them, I've removed their clothes and I'm using some plastic wrap to wrap their bodies together. This is going to protect the bodies as well as keep them nice and snug and back to back. Now, before I put the dolls in the center of the cake, I'm just going to dollop a little bit of buttercream frosting at the bottom, and it's going to act as a little glue for them to stand in. You'll remember I cut the dome off the bottom layer of my cake, and I'm going to use that without throwing it away. I'm going to cut out the middle section with my circle cutter and cut it in half, and use some buttercream frosting at the top of the cake to add this little layer. This little layer is going to give a little bit of extra height and make the top of the cake nice and round from their waist down. Now, using my serrated knife, it's time to start shaping the cake. So there's not a lot that needs to be taken off the cake. I'm basically going to follow the round curve at the top of my cake and taper it down the sides. It's a good idea to start off by taking just a little bit off at a time, because if you cut a large chunk out of the cake, it's a little bit hard to fix. Once I'm happy with the shape that I've got, I'm going to cover the entire cake with my buttercream frosting. Now, to get a nice smooth surface on the frosting, I've just got a piece of paper towel which I'm resting on the cake and very gently smoothing over with my hand. Before I start covering the cake in fondant, I'm going to transfer it onto my board. Now I'm going to start decorating the cake, and it's easiest to do one doll at a time, so I'm going to start with Anna. I've got this blue fondant here which I'm rolling out to about 2 to 3 mil thick, and this is going to form her skirt. And before I place it on the cake, I'm going to use my palette knife to just make a little mark down each side of the cake in between Anna and Elsa. And then carefully lifting up the fondant, I'm going to place it onto Anna's side of the cake. With the excess on either side, I'm just going to use my X-Acto blade and trim it off, just following the line that I created in the buttercream frosting. And then I'm going to give the cake a little bit of a smooth, just to get rid of any little bumps, and trim off the excess at the bottom of her skirt. Now to work on Anna's blouse, I've got some of the light blue fondant, and I'm going to cut out 2 long strips and just attach them to each of her arms to create the sleeve. So just placing the fondant on top of her arm and carefully pinching it together at the bottom. At the very end, I'm just going to roll up the fondant just to give it a nice little cuff look. I'm just going to cut out a little piece of fondant for the top of her blouse and stick that to her body. And with a tiny little strip of the same blue coloured fondant, I'm going to put that at the very top. Using the black fondant, I'm going to cut out a bodice for her, following the same pattern of her actual dress, and then adhere that to the cake. For the pattern on Anna's bodice, I've rolled out some thin little snakes of green fondant, and I'm just going to create a few little patterns and stick them to her bodice. You can create whatever design you like or feel comfortable with. There are no rules here, I'm just trying to create a pretty little stitching design for her bodice. Guys, if you're enjoying this tutorial, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and check out all of my other creative cake videos. If there's something you'd like to see me make, drop me a line in the comment section below. So to finish off her bodice, I'm just adding some pink trim, and I've rolled out some snakes out of the pink fondant, and I've just added it to the top and bottom of the bodice, as well as these little pink flowers which I've cut using my flower plunge cutter. To make the border that runs along the bottom of Anna's skirt, I've rolled out a piece of fondant using the same blue that I used for her blouse and cut a thin strip, and now with my 1-inch round cutter I'm just going to create a scallop pattern by cutting out half a circle from the top edge of the fondant. Using my other little petal cutters, I'm going to cut some shapes out of my light blue fondant, and together with my pink flowers I'm going to create a nice little pattern at the bottom of her skirt. Now that Anna's all finished, I can concentrate on Elsa, so I've just rolled out some blue fondant which I'm going to use to cover the cake. I'm going to give it a quick smooth and then trim off all the excess on both the sides where it joins up with Anna's skirt, as well as at the bottom of her skirt. Still using the light blue fondant, I'm going to create 2 sleeves just in the same way I did for Anna, except I'm not going to roll up a little cuff at the bottom this time. And I'm just going to use another little piece of the blue fondant to cover her décolletage area. Now using some of the dark blue fondant, I'm going to cut out a bodice for Elsa and attach it to her body. Of course, Anna and Elsa are out in the snow, so they need their capes with them. And to create Anna's cape, I've rolled out some of the pink fondant and cut out a small piece which will be the top flap of her cape, and then cut out 2 long strips from the remaining pink fondant which I'm going to use on either side of the cake. So I'm going to attach it from the top of her shoulders and drape it down the centre seam where the girls' dresses meet, and make sure it stays in place with a little bit of water to adhere it. Elsa's cape is very glittery and shimmery, so on top of my rolled out fondant I'm going to dab some water and make sure it's nice and moist before sprinkling on a nice generous layer of my light blue sanding sugar, followed by a light sprinkle of the blue glittery flakes. I'm just going to give it a little press to make sure it's all adhered nicely. As I lift it off, any of the excess that is not stuck will just simply fall off. And then it's simply a matter of positioning the cape in between Anna and Elsa. I'm going to let the fondant drape a little bit at the bottom and try and create a few pleats. And once I've done the other side as well, I can attach the top of Anna's cape, draping it around her shoulders and bringing it to the front. And finally, it wouldn't have been complete without a scattering of snowflakes at the bottom. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial of Anna and Elsa on the same cake. Now you don't have to choose, you can have them both. Guys, if you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to give it a like and share it with your friends. I love to get your suggestions and feedback, so don't forget to leave me a comment in the section below. If you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you can see all my creative cake tutorials as I release them. And as always, thanks for watching, guys.